Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the night sky stretched endlessly above you, an ocean of quiet light pulsing softly like the breath of something ancient. Somewhere beyond the reach of our telescopes and the hum of our cities, a traveler has been wandering for billions of years. It carries the dust of forgotten stars, the memory of places no one has ever seen. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, listen closely. The universe is telling a story, a slow, gentle one about a small, glowing visitor called 3i Atlas, and the humans who looked up and found it. The story begins on a cold, wind-swept night in the mountains of Chile, where the air is thin and the stars feel close enough to touch. Inside a quiet observatory perched above the clouds, the Atlas telescope blinked its steady red light across the dark horizon. The scientists inside had grown used to silence, long hours of waiting, of watching screens that rarely changed. But that night, something stirred in the data. At first, it was nothing more than a glimmer, a faint point sliding across the field of stars. Yet it moved in a way no ordinary object should. It was fast, too fast. One of the astronomers leaned closer, eyes wide behind fogged glasses. "That's no asteroid," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the machines. "It's coming from outside." Outside. The word lingered like frost in the room. Within hours, the discovery raced through messages and calls, leaping from one observatory to another. Telescopes across the world turned their eyes toward that tiny streak of light. And from that moment on, the universe had a new guest. They called it 3i Atlas, the third known interstellar object to ever pass through our solar system. Far away from Earth, the visitor traveled alone through the velvet dark. It had no name when it left its home, perhaps a shattered world, perhaps a forgotten star system. But here, under the patient gaze of human curiosity, it was given one. Astronomers traced its path backward through space, and what they found made their hearts tremble. It had been moving for billions of years, crossing the distance between suns, carrying with it dust older than our planet. The universe, it seemed, had decided to whisper to us again. For the people watching from Earth, the discovery felt both small and enormous. Small because it was only a point of light on a screen, fainter than a candle flame. Enormous because it proved that even in the silence between stars, something could still reach us. There was wonder in that realization, a tender awe that spread quietly through every observatory, every sleepless scientist, every ordinary person who looked up that night and wondered if they might glimpse it too. They imagined it a frozen traveler no larger than a hill gliding past planets and moons, its tail beginning to shimmer as sunlight touched its surface. The light that left it would take minutes to reach us yet. In that delay there was a kind of intimacy, like hearing a song that began long before we were born. It was moving at 58 kilometers per second, faster than any spacecraft humans had ever built. Its surface, coated in ice and cosmic dust, caught the faint glow of distant suns. Some believed it carried secrets about how worlds were formed long before Earth existed. Others, quieter in their thoughts, wondered if it was carrying something more, something spiritual, a reminder that the universe still remembers us, even when we forget to look up. Night after night, the data grew richer. Numbers filled screens, coordinates shifted, reports were sent. And beneath it all was a hush, a reverence like being in a cathedral not built by hands, but by time itself. In that stillness, science began to take on the rhythm of prayer. There were no loud announcements yet, no breaking headlines. Only the quiet work of those who knew they were witnessing something rare, something sacred in its simplicity. In every pixel of the Atlas image, they saw the trace of an ancient journey, a path carved through the endless dark. Perhaps they thought this was not a discovery at all. Perhaps it was a meeting. As dawn rose over the Chilean peaks, the astronomers stepped outside. The night was giving way to soft gold, but the sky still shimmered faintly with stars. One of them closed his eyes, feeling the cold bite of the air, and smiled. "It's strange," he murmured. "It feels alive." And maybe in some faraway way it was. For everything that travels so far must carry a story, a reason to keep moving even through the silence of eternity. That morning, as sunlight washed over the observatory domes, the world below remained unaware that its cosmic neighborhood had just welcomed a guest from beyond the stars. But soon, they would know. The headlines would come, the debates, the excitement. And through it all, the Atlas would continue its quiet glide toward the inner solar system, as if drawn by some invisible thread. It would pass Mars, then approach the Earth's orbit, not close enough to touch, but close enough for our hearts to feel the weight of its presence. And as it moved, telescopes would awaken one by one, eager to understand it, to capture its faint reflection. The whisper in the sky had become a voice. Somewhere deep in space, the comet turned slightly, its icy skin catching the sun's distant glow. The dust began to stir, rising like breath in the cold. A new light unfurled across the void, soft, unhurried, the color of memory. Humanity watched, breath held. And though they could not hear it, the universe sighed, ancient, patient, and kind. If you felt the gentle pull of this journey tonight, if the thought of a lonely traveler among the stars has eased your heart, remember there are more stories waiting for you. Subscribe to Gentle Sleep Stories, and let your nights be filled with the quiet magic of the cosmos. The night faded slowly, as if reluctant to let go of the moment when the universe had whispered its secret. And yet, in every observatory, in every quiet mind that had been touched by that faint shimmer of light, the echo of 3i Atlas lingered like a melody that refused to end. The whisper had become curiosity. The curiosity, wonder. And wonder in turn always becomes the beginning of a story. Now, as the world awoke to news of the visitor, a question began to rise among astronomers and dreamers alike. Where did it come from? What ancient path had led this lonely wanderer to our doorstep, after billions of years adrift among the stars? When they traced its orbit backward through the dark, they found something astonishing. The path of 3i Atlas didn't point toward any nearby star, any cluster, or even any known region of birth. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, a ghost drifting from the uncharted plains between galaxies. Its journey had begun before the Earth had oceans, before the first mountain rose, before life had even imagined itself into being. It was older than memory, older than the dust beneath our feet. The scientists who studied it tried to remain objective, but even in their quiet professionalism, a kind of reverence grew. They looked at the data and saw more than numbers. They saw age, distance, solitude, things too vast to comprehend. For all its scientific value, 3i Atlas carried something that no calculation could contain: the feeling of time itself made visible. It had traveled through cosmic storms and the dim light of dying suns. It had passed the frozen remains of planets that never formed, and the gentle glow of nebulae, still giving birth to new stars. Layer upon layer of dust had gathered upon its icy skin, each particle a fragment of a story older than our world. If one could brush a hand across its surface, perhaps they would feel not cold, but history, billions of years pressed into silence. The astronomers compared it to the two wanderers that had come before: Oumuamua, the mysterious shard that glided through our solar system in 2017, and Borisov, the glowing traveler of 2019. Yet 3I Atlas was different. It moved faster, nearly 58 kilometers each second, as if driven by some quiet urgency. And it seemed older, weathered not by the warmth of stars, but by the long, lonely dark between them. They gave it a name with letters and numbers, but in truth it felt more like a poem, a messenger without language, speaking only in light. To some it was a relic from creation's dawn. To others a fragment of a forgotten world. But to everyone who gazed upon it, it was a reminder that we are never as isolated as we believe. Even in the endless expanse, something still finds its way to us. From Chile to Hawaii, from the mountains of Spain to the icy plains of Antarctica, telescopes turned their glass eyes toward this faint speck in the heavens. Each image revealed just enough to deepen the mystery. Its brightness changed slightly from night to night, its color soft and pale like morning frost. Some said it looked like a frozen teardrop, others like a spark caught between breaths. In university halls and quiet living rooms, people spoke of it in hushed tones. Children watched animations of it gliding through the cosmos, and poets wrote lines comparing its journey to the human heart, wandering, searching, burning with quiet light, even in exile. The Vatican's observatory issued a calm reflection calling 3I Atlas a guest in the house of creation. Radio programs invited astronomers to explain its speed and orbit, yet even the most rational voices seemed softened, humbled. One scientist said simply, "It reminds me that space isn't empty, it's full of time." Outside the realm of science, imagination began to bloom. Was it just a frozen stone or a message carved by the cosmos itself? Could it hold within its dust the same ingredients that once formed life on Earth? Or was it a survivor, the last piece of a planet that perished long ago, still wandering in search of warmth? The truth, perhaps, was all of these, and none. For in the stillness of the universe, truth is rarely a single thing. Weeks passed, and the world's interest deepened. More telescopes joined the effort. Hubble, the veteran watcher of the skies, prepared to capture it. The James Webb Space Telescope was scheduled to listen to its chemical whispers. The story of 3I Atlas was no longer confined to scientists. It belonged to everyone who had ever stood beneath a night sky and wondered what lay beyond. And through all the excitement, a strange peace followed. Something about this visitor soothed the human spirit. Perhaps it was the reminder that time flows differently beyond our world, or that in the quiet, dark, beauty endures. The comet did not hurry. It moved at its own pace, as if teaching us that not every journey needs to be swift to be meaningful. For those who couldn't sleep, I Atlas became a companion. People stood on balconies and rooftops searching for it, though it was far too faint to see with the naked eye. Still, the thought of it gliding silently beyond reach was enough. It felt like a promise that somewhere out there, the universe was still breathing, still telling stories through the movement of light. One night, an elderly astronomer, who had devoted her life to studying comets, sat alone at her telescope. The air was thin, her breath visible in the cold. As she stared at the faint blur on her monitor, tears welled in her eyes. Not from sadness, but from recognition. "It's like looking into a mirror," she whispered. "We're both travelers, aren't we?" Maybe that was the gift of Three Eyes Atlas. It reflected us back to ourselves, not our noise or our progress, but our longing, our patience, our quiet hope. And as it continued its slow drift toward the inner solar system, it carried not only stardust and ice, but the fragile dreams of those who had noticed it. In that sense, it was no longer just a visitor. It had become part of our story, a chapter written in the language of the stars. So, if tonight you look up and feel a little smaller, remember, smallness is not insignificance. It's an invitation to wonder. The same starlight that glides across Three Eye Atlas also falls gently on your face. You too are made of that ancient dust carrying the memory of creation in your breath. And as you close your eyes drifting toward sleep, imagine that quiet traveler passing by, older than time but still shining softly, faithfully, beautifully. If you wish to follow its journey and hear more stories whispered by the cosmos, subscribe to Gentle Sleep Stories and let the universe lull you into dreams. The days that followed felt slower, as if time itself had paused to watch. Three Eye Atlas was now more than a traveler. It was a companion in the minds of those who dreamed beneath the stars. From observatories across the world, the data poured in like fragments of a song that no one wanted to end. Each night added a new note, a faint shimmer of truth in the long, dark silence of space. And now the song had reached new ears. For the great eye of the heavens, the Hubble Space Telescope was ready to awaken and look. Hubble had seen much in its long life. It had watched galaxies collide, nebulae bloom, and the faintest light from the earliest moments of creation drift across the black sea of time. But this was something different. A visitor not born of our solar family, an ancient wanderer brushing briefly against our sun before vanishing again into the deep. It was a fleeting chance to see something no human eye had ever seen before. High above Earth, Hubble drifted silently, a cathedral of metal and glass in orbit. On July 21st, it turned its mirrors toward the coordinates sent from Chile. The instruments aligned with delicate precision, and for a moment there was nothing but static, the usual hum of cosmic background. Then, in the soft glow of the captured frame, there it was, a faint teardrop of light surrounded by a thin haze of dust. The scientists stared in reverent silence. On the screen, the stars behind the comet stretched into streaks, lines of motion painted by time. But the visitor itself was sharp and luminous, its nucleus glowing faintly at the center of a soft, ghostly coma. It was small, smaller than they had first thought. The early estimates had imagined a massive body perhaps 10 kilometers wide. But now, Hubble's clear gaze revealed something humbler, no more than a few thousand feet across, maybe a mile or two at most. And yet, despite its size, It shone with a quiet power. The dust around it was alive, shimmering in the sunlight, drifting away like the breath of an old world, remembering how to dream. The image was sent to research teams across the globe. Some printed it and pinned it to their office walls. Others stared at it for hours, tracing its contours as though it might speak to them. To see something that had traveled across eons, now captured in a single frame of light, it stirred something deep, something wordless. One astronomer described it simply. It feels like seeing the past still moving. Through the data, Hubble revealed more than beauty. The measurements hinted that much of the brightness came not from the nucleus itself, but from the surrounding cloud, the coma of vaporized ice and dust reflecting sunlight. That meant 3I Atlas was active, alive, in a sense, shedding the frozen layers it had carried across the universe. The more it approached the sun, the more it would awaken. In that realization was a strange tenderness. It was as though the warmth of our star, so distant and indifferent, was gently waking a sleeping traveler. Slowly, delicately, the ancient ice began to exhale. The scientists watched and waited, knowing that the comet's time near us would be brief. For a few short weeks, Hubble would trace its path, and then it would slip beyond the sun's glare, lost from view. Each observation became a kind of prayer, a moment to listen to what the universe was trying to say before the silence returned. They calculated its motion 58 kilometers per second, nearly twice the speed of any spacecraft humanity had ever launched. At that pace, it was impossible not to feel a hint of melancholy. Nothing that fast could ever stay. And yet, in that fleetingness lay the beauty. The comet was teaching them something subtle, that transience could be sacred, that sometimes the things that stay only for a moment leave the deepest marks on the heart. Across the world, news outlets began to share the Hubble image. People saw it on their screens, an oval of light, soft and mysterious. And for a moment, the noise of the world seemed to quiet. They didn't understand the technical details, nor did they need to. It was enough to know that a piece of the universe had come close, and that we in our smallness had reached out to meet it. In homes and cafes, in classrooms, and on night walks, people spoke of 3I Atlas. Some wondered what secrets it carried in its frozen shell. Others thought of it as a messenger, a reminder of how fragile and vast creation truly is. Children imagined riding on its back, gliding between planets, waving at Earth as it spun below. Meanwhile, in the quiet control rooms where scientists worked, the data kept coming. Every image was a whisper of motion, a letter from a traveler that had no language but light. And through these letters, they began to see the comet not as a stranger, but as a mirror, something that reflected our own longing to belong somewhere in this infinite expanse. When the final images of that session were downloaded, the lead astronomer leaned back in her chair. She thought about the way the dust trailed behind the comet, stretching into the dark like a veil. There was elegance in it, but also fragility. The universe, she realized, was made not just of stars and matter, but of fleeting gestures, moments that vanish even as they are noticed. She saved the images, labeled them carefully, and before shutting down the monitors, whispered softly, "Safe travels." Outside the observatory windows, dawn had begun to glow faintly over the horizon. The world below was waking, unaware that above it, the Hubble telescope floated silently, still gazing into the endless dark. In that stillness, light continued its patient journey from the comet to the telescope, from the telescope to Earth, from Earth into our hearts. It was a reminder that even in the farthest reaches of the cosmos, beauty waits to be found by those who take the time to look. And somewhere in the quiet between those stars, Atlas kept moving, steady, silent, ancient, carrying its story onward through the cold sea of time. It would not be alone for long. Another great eye was preparing to gaze upon it, not in visible light, but in the deep, invisible tones of the infrared. The James Webb Space Telescope, younger, stronger, and infinitely sensitive, was waiting to listen to the breath of this interstellar traveler. The universe was about to reveal another layer of its secret. The echoes of Hubble's revelation lingered like a soft afterglow in the hearts of those who had seen it. The image of 3I Atlas, a tear-shaped traveler wrapped in a veil of dust, was now etched into human imagination. Yet in science, as in music, one note always leads to another. And where Hubble's vision had captured the light, another instrument now prepared to capture the whisper behind it. High above the warmth of Earth's atmosphere, a far younger eye, more sensitive, more patient, waited to listen. The James Webb Space Telescope was ready. If Hubble had been the poet of starlight, then Webb was the listener of silence. Its mirrors, polished to near perfection, could read the faintest breaths of warmth from objects so distant they were nearly erased by time. And so, when it turned toward 3I Atlas, it wasn't looking for brightness, it was listening for the faint sigh of molecules that no human sense could detect. On the 6th of August, the telescope aligned its golden mirrors toward the interstellar visitor. Across millions of miles, photons that had left the comet minutes before brushed against Webb's sensors. The instruments came alive, translating invisible frequencies into meaning. What they found was astonishing. The comet was breathing. In the frozen dark of space where heat is rare and stillness eternal, Atlas was exhaling gases into the void. Carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, the ancient remnants of its birth, were evaporating from its surface, forming a delicate cloud that shimmered faintly around it. To the human eye, it would have been invisible, but Webb saw it clearly, glowing like a candle smoke under the sun's distant touch. Dr. Martin Cordiner, the astrochemist leading the observation, leaned closer to the data feed. The spectral lines, those thin, trembling fingerprints of matter, told a story that was both familiar and strange. Unlike many comets which breathe water when they near the sun, 3I Atlas was releasing more carbon gases than water vapor. It was as though its heart remembered a colder birth, a place where water froze so deeply it forgot how to move. The scientists spoke quietly, their voices hushed, as though afraid to disturb something sacred. "It's old," one of them said. "Older than any comet we've known." The analysis revealed something else, patterns in the outgassing that seemed almost rhythmic. Jets of gas burst forth from the comet's surface in small, irregular pulses, suggesting fractures or vents beneath its icy skin. Webb's instruments caught hints of these shifting plumes, faint fluctuations in brightness that rose and fell like a heartbeat. If Hubble had shown us the comet's face, Webb was now showing us its soul. There was something intimate about the way the data unfolded, numbers and graphs. Yes, but behind them, the pulse of a distant traveler thawing under sunlight, for the first time in eons. The scientists watched with awe as they realized they were witnessing the return of warmth to something that had known only cold for billions of years. But Webb also captured a mystery. While comets usually trail their dust away from the sun, Atlas seemed to defy that rule. The telescope's data suggested that some of its dust was flowing toward the sun instead. It made no sense unless the particles were fragmenting, breaking apart, and scattering light in new directions. Perhaps the scientists mused the comet was shedding layers of itself as it traveled like an old wanderer, removing the weight of his cloak beneath a growing light. The more they studied, the more questions bloomed. Could this strange behavior mean that 3I Atlas was unstable? Would it survive its approach to the sun? Or would it dissolve like a snowflake in fire? No one could say. And yet even that uncertainty carried beauty. In the realm of stars, nothing endures forever. The fragility of the comet made its existence even more precious. Beyond the data and the numbers, the Webb image held something quietly human. A reminder that even in the vastness of space, there are moments of tenderness, tiny gestures of survival that defy the cold. The comet was not roaring across the cosmos. It was whispering. It was breathing gently, exhaling ancient air into the dark, like a memory of creation itself. Dr. Cordiner wrote in his log that day, "It feels almost alive, its chemistry changing its breath uneven as though the sun's touch has awakened something half asleep." For those who read his words later, there was a sense of awe not just in what was discovered, but in how it was described. The language of science had quietly turned into poetry, and no one seemed to mind. As the telescope continued its silent watch, the comet kept releasing its gases, painting invisible ribbons through the void. Somewhere deep within its nucleus, new fractures formed microscopic cracks that allowed more light to enter, more warmth to reach its core. The process was slow but relentless, a kind of cosmic thaw. Weeks later, when the Webb data was compiled, scientists compared it to the findings from Hubble. Together, the two portraits told a single story: an ancient wanderer, small and worn, awakening under the touch of a young star. It was both fragile and magnificent, like watching an old heart begin to beat again after an eternity of silence. Back on Earth, the news spread in quiet waves. Articles described how Webb had heard the breath of an interstellar visitor. People read those headlines in the calm of evening, imagining a lonely speck of ice whispering across the infinite dark. To most, it was a scientific marvel. To some, it was a comfort. Because in that story of something frozen finding warmth, of something forgotten beginning to shine again, there was something deeply human. It spoke to the hidden places in our hearts, the ones that wait patiently for light. As the observations concluded, Webb turned its gaze to other mysteries. But somewhere in its data banks, in those spectral lines etched across a digital sky, lay the faint rhythm of a comet's breath, an ancient lullaby sung in the cold between stars. And far away, 3I Atlas continued on its course, drifting ever closer to the sun. It did not know it was being watched, or that millions of hearts had followed its story. It simply moved, as it had always done, guided by forces older than memory. The warmth would grow stronger now, and with it the activity within its core. Soon other telescopes on Earth and in orbit would turn their gaze toward it. The next chapter of its journey was waiting to be written, and humanity still listening was ready to follow. The voice of the universe is never loud. It hums softly, like breath against glass. Its messages hidden within light that travels silently through space. When the James Webb Space Telescope finished its listening, humanity thought it had heard all that 3I Atlas had to tell. But deep within NASA's archives, an older set of eyes, humble, patient, always watching, had already seen the visitor before anyone even knew it existed. The discovery did not come from a telescope gazing through cold mountain air, but from a satellite orbiting far above Earth, one designed for a completely different purpose. Its name was TESS, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite. TESS had been scanning the skies for years, searching for distant worlds that dimmed their parent stars as they passed before them. It was the dreamer's machine built to find planets where life might one day be imagined. Its 4 cameras swept great fields of space, capturing subtle flickers of light. And in that vast collection of starlight and shadow lay something unnoticed, a tiny trace of 3I Atlas. Long before the comet was discovered by the Atlas telescope in Chile, TESS had quietly recorded it. Hidden in the data from May 2025 were faint movements across the background of stars, too soft for the automated systems to recognize at first. Only months later, when astronomers revisited those early files, did they realize that the traveler had already passed through TESS's gaze. It was like finding an old photograph of someone you had just met, a memory that proves your paths had crossed long before you knew it. 3 scientists, Adina Feinstein, John Noonan, and Daryl Seligman, were the first to uncover this forgotten light. They poured through the TESS archives, examining the data from May 7th to June 2nd, piecing together a faint but undeniable trail. As they combined the images, the comet slowly emerged from the noise, a ghost becoming real. The realization filled them with a quiet thrill. For weeks they worked under the glow of computer screens, measuring the brightness, calculating its changes, and comparing them to newer observations. What they found surprised everyone. The comet had not merely glowed, it had grown brighter, far brighter than expected. Between May and June, the distance between TESS and 3I Atlas shrank by less than 1 astronomical unit, a small change compared to the ocean of space between them. By all logic, its brightness should have increased only slightly. But the data revealed something different. Its luminosity had surged nearly 5-fold. The comet had flared like a candle finding new air, its reflected light leaping far beyond mathematical expectation. In the stillness of the night, one of the researchers whispered, "It's alive." Of course, they knew it wasn't alive in the way we are, but the phrase felt right. There was something strangely vital about it. A traveler that had wandered frozen through darkness for billions of years, suddenly blazing with energy as it neared a small yellow sun. The equations said it was outgassing, releasing more volatile elements than before, perhaps nitrogen or hydrogen materials that evaporate even in the deep cold. Yet to those who watched its light increase, it felt almost emotional, as though the comet had remembered the warmth of a home it once knew. Feinstein wrote in her report that the data suggested a remarkable resilience. The comet had been active even when it was still far beyond the usual reach of the sun's heat, nearly 6 astronomical units away near the realm of Jupiter. Most comets sleep at such distance their surfaces locked in ice. But not this one. 3i Atlas had already begun to awaken. And so, piece by piece, a portrait began to form, not of a frozen relic, but of something restless, responsive, capable of surprising even those who measured it. The researchers studied its light curve, searching for patterns, rhythms, perhaps even a rotation period. But the data resisted interpretation. Unlike other comets that flickered with regularity as they turned, this one seemed almost stubbornly, even its brightness constant and unpredictable at the same time. It was as though it did not wish to be read easily. The astronomers smiled at the mystery. For every answer 3i Atlas gave, it posed another question, inviting not mastery but humility. In the language of science, they described it as complex behavior. In the language of the heart, it was simply wonder. When their paper was finally published, the world learned of Tess's forgotten images. Headlines called it the comet that brightened too soon. But beneath the surface of the articles was something gentler, the feeling that even machines built for one purpose can stumble upon beauty they were never meant to find. It reminded people that discovery often comes quietly from the margins, in the unlooked-for places where patience meets accident. For a few days, the story of Tess and the comet filled the science columns. Then the news cycle moved on as it always does. But for those who had worked with the data, it never faded. In the sleepless hours between calculations, they would look at the faint arc of light in the Tess image and feel a strange kinship. Like them, the comet was small in the vastness, doing what it could to reflect light to move forward despite the pull of gravity and time. And in that reflection, they found meaning. The discovery also reignited hope among those who had followed 3i Atlas from the beginning. If Tess could glimpse it months before it was officially found, perhaps other instruments had caught it too. Perhaps pieces of its journey still waited hidden in archives, waiting for human eyes to notice. The thought gave comfort, proof that, even in science as in life, sometimes we see the miracle only after it has already passed. Outside the world of data, ordinary people began sharing the story online, a forgotten observation, a rediscovered light, a comet growing brighter as it neared the warmth of the sun. Some saw in it a metaphor for their own lives, for the long winters of silence and the unexpected seasons of renewal. Maybe we're all like that, one comment read, moving through the dark until something makes us shine. And perhaps that was true. The researchers continued their work, knowing that soon the comet would grow even more luminous. Telescopes on Earth were being prepared, their domes ready to open once again. But for now, they let the numbers rest. The graphs fade into black screens, and stepped outside. The night was still. The stars above them looked no different than they had the night before. Yet the knowledge that one of those faint points of light carried a story, a memory of time itself, filled them with quiet joy. Somewhere out there, 3i Atlas drifted, shedding light like a whispered promise, a bright echo from before memory began. And as they gazed upward, the scientists felt what every dreamer has felt beneath the stars, that to study the universe is not just to seek understanding, but to remember that we belong to it. The comet's brightness would continue to grow, and soon its light would spill across the lenses of telescopes on Earth. The next watchers were already waiting. The Gemini South Observatory in Chile had begun preparing for a new observation window. Another discovery was about to begin. The forgotten glow found by Tess had reminded the world that the universe keeps its memories quietly hidden until we are ready to see them. For a moment, the data had whispered of awakening a comet brightening faster than any prediction alive in its own mysterious rhythm. And as scientists marveled over the sudden flare, they knew it was only the beginning. The brightness of 3I Atlas was no longer a gentle shimmer on a graph. It was becoming something fierce, a radiant outpouring of energy that no one had anticipated. In early June, as the Earth tilted beneath the warmth of summer, the telescopes began to record another transformation. The comet's light, once faint and easily overlooked, was now undeniable. Its magnitude had jumped beyond reason, increasing by a factor of 5. To the naked eye, it was still invisible, but through the lenses of observatories, it had become a firefly against the deep. The scientists at TESS, still astonished by their discovery, compared their findings with ground-based observatories. In both hemispheres, the results were the same. 3I Atlas had grown brighter, not gradually, not modestly, but suddenly, almost joyfully, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. In astronomy, light means energy, and energy means activity. Something within the comet had changed. Perhaps it had cracked under the warmth of the sun, releasing buried gases into the void. Or perhaps it had reached a turning point in its ancient journey, the moment when darkness could no longer hold its silence. Whatever the cause, the result was stunning. The visitor was alive with motion. The Gemini North and South telescopes soon confirmed the surge. They watched as the coma expanded and the tail stretched farther into space, lengthening with each rotation. The faint veil of dust, once delicate as a whisper, now shimmered like a river of starlight. From 446 million kilometers away, the Hubble team reported that even their earlier images no longer captured its full brilliance. The comet had become unpredictable, restless, magnificent. To those who studied it, Atlas was no longer a passive traveler. It was a revelation in motion. Its brightness had outpaced every model, every curve that scientists could draw. When they recalculated its energy output, they realized that it was reflecting far more sunlight than it should have been. It was not only responding to the sun, it was amplifying it, scattering radiance across the dark like a mirror that had found its purpose. Astronomers compared notes late into the night. They spoke of sublimation, of thermal stress, of volatile elements. Yet behind every technical phrase was wonder. Some whispered that maybe this was what beauty looked like when it couldn't contain itself. Theories soon followed. Perhaps the comet's surface had fractured, exposing fresh ice that glimmered under the sun's light. Or perhaps it was shedding its outer layer entirely, releasing frozen gases that had been trapped for eons. In either case, the behavior was extraordinary. No other interstellar visitor, neither Oumuamua nor Borisov, had ever shown this kind of exuberance. For the public, the news was simple but enchanting. The comet from another star is getting brighter. People who had never looked through a telescope began to look up, searching for it with the same curiosity that had once driven ancient sailors to follow the stars. They couldn't see it, but they could imagine it, a shining wanderer racing through the solar winds with a tail that sparkled like frost. Across social media, artists painted it, poets described it, musicians composed melodies inspired by its light. Somewhere between the equations and the imagination, 3I Atlas had become a symbol. A reminder that even the oldest, loneliest traveler could still flare into brilliance. In a quiet office at the University of Chicago, Adina Feinstein wrote her final notes for publication. Between the 7th of May and the 2nd of June, she typed, "The comet increased its flux 5-fold." Then she paused, watching the cursor blink like a heartbeat. To most, those numbers were dry. But to her they meant life, an ancient world relit by a sun it had never known. Later she would describe the moment in an interview. "It's like watching something wake up," she said softly. "It's been asleep for billions of years. And then suddenly, it remembers how to shine." The thought caught on. Journalists quoted her words, and soon the comet's light became a metaphor shared around the world. Teachers used it to explain perseverance. Writers used it to describe hope. The story of 3I Atlas was no longer confined to the laboratories and observatories. It belonged to everyone who had ever struggled through a long night and still dared to look for dawn. Meanwhile, back in the observatories, the data continued to pour in. The rise in brightness was accompanied by subtle fluctuations, small tremors that hinted at rotation. Some researchers believed the comet might be spinning faster now, its surface breaking apart under centrifugal strain. Others thought it was stable, its light fluctuating only because of changing angles and reflection. The truth remained elusive, and yet no one seemed frustrated. The mystery itself was a kind of grace. For astronomers, it was easy to forget emotion behind their graphs and numbers. But this comet, this unpredictable visitor from another system, brought something different. It was a reminder that science is not cold. It is love expressed through attention. It is devotion to the unknown. As the days passed, the Atlas grew even more radiant. The dust from its surface scattered through space, catching the sunlight in fragments that twinkled like faraway candles. The comet's tail lengthened, curving gently under the solar wind. Instruments detected new gases, carbon dioxide, hydrogen cyanide, even traces of nitrogen, all whispering of ancient chemistry and forgotten worlds. Somewhere beyond calculation, the human heart recognized something familiar. The comet's surge of light felt like a song, one of release, of remembrance, of joy. And just as all songs do, this one began to find harmony. More telescopes joined the chorus, ready to record its evolution. The Gemini observatories in Chile prepared for a new phase of observation. Hubble would continue to track it. James Webb would listen once more, and other instruments would soon follow. But for now, as the light of 3I Atlas spilled gently through the solar winds, Earth turned beneath it unaware. Billions slept, their dreams touched faintly by photons that had left the comet's surface days before. Those who were awake, astronomers, poets, wanderers of thought, watched in silence. It was strange how such a small thing, no more than a few kilometers wide, could hold so much meaning. Yet, that is the way of the universe. The vastest truths are often carried by the smallest messengers. And so the comet continued its journey, burning brighter with every heartbeat of the sun, a streak of living light across the dark sea of time. Soon it would unveil its full tail, a luminous trail stretching into eternity. The Gemini South telescope in Chile was already waiting, its instruments polished and poised to capture the next phase of this celestial dance. The world would soon see not only the brightness but the movement, the unfolding of the comet's magnificent tail. The light had come first, an unexpected brilliance that broke through the silence of interstellar space and awakened 1,000 questions on Earth. But light alone was never the whole story. Where there is light, there is movement, and where there is movement, there is change. As the brightness of 3I Atlas grew, it was no longer just a distant glow in the night sky. It began to take shape, to stretch, to breathe. The comet was writing its next chapter in dust and motion, and this time it was the Earth's great eyes in the southern hemisphere that would bear witness. High in the Chilean Andes, under skies so clear they seemed made of glass, the Gemini South telescope turned its gaze toward the visitor. The night of August 27th was still, the air thin, the stars sharp enough to pierce thought. Astronomers inside the observatory worked in near silence, their hands moving over keyboards, their breaths slow. When the data began to flow, it arrived like a soft, steady pulse, a rhythm older than humanity itself. On their screens appeared something extraordinary, a long, luminous extension trailing behind the comet. The tail of 3I Atlas had finally revealed itself. It shimmered faintly, almost imperceptible at first, like smoke caught in sunlight. But as the images sharpened, the structure came alive, a ribbon of dust flowing from the nucleus, curling delicately through the darkness. It was beautiful in a way that defied words, not blazing or grand, but pure and silent, like a sigh released into eternity. One of the scientists whispered, "It's growing." And indeed it was. The tail stretched roughly 1/120th of a degree across the sky, a measure that might seem small to the untrained eye, but immense to those who knew the scale of such distances. It was longer than in any previous image, longer even than what Gemini North had recorded a month earlier. 3. Atlas was becoming more active, its frozen core awakening under the sun's tender pressure. Outside the observatory, the winds from the Pacific swept across the mountain slopes. The stars above shimmered slightly, and it was easy to imagine the same winds magnified 1,000-fold, shaping the comet's tail. For that was what it was, a dance between light and motion, between the sun's invisible breath and the comet's fragile dust. Scientists call it the solar wind, a river of charged particles flowing endlessly from the sun, brushing against everything it touches. To most celestial bodies it is harmless, unnoticed. But to a comet, it is the music that gives it form. And so, as the solar wind played its eternal tune, 3A Atlas began to dance. The dust grains, once bound tightly to its surface, lifted and drifted outward, tracing the currents of energy that streamed from our star. From Earth, it appeared as a soft arc, a trail of silver-blue mist, bending gracefully away from the sun. But in reality, each grain of dust was moving with purpose, responding to forces older than time itself. In that motion there was both grace and fragility. The tail was not permanent. It was a fleeting creation, constantly remade, as new dust was released, and old dust scattered into space. Yet it held a quiet majesty, a reminder that even things born to fade can be beautiful beyond measure. For the scientists watching from Chile, the images were mesmerizing. They adjusted filters, captured multicolor composites, and layered exposures to trace the smallest details. The Gemini multi-object spectrograph revealed subtle hues within the tail, soft reds, pale greens, faint blues, all blending into a whisper of light. Each color told a story, the carbon molecules fluorescing the sunlight, scattering across silicate dust, the faint traces of ionized gas. As they analyzed the data, they realized the comet's activity was accelerating. It was venting more material now than it had weeks before. The warmth of the sun was awakening deeper layers of ice, releasing vapors that carried dust into the surrounding void. The process was delicate but relentless, like a frozen heart remembering how to beat. And with each rotation, the atlas changed again. The tail thickened, brightened, curved. It seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as sunlight and motion intertwined. The comet was alive with energy, not in the biological sense, but in the cosmic one. It was a moment of transformation written across millions of miles. The researchers recorded their findings, but when the data was done, they stayed to look. Through the telescope's images, through the faint digital echo of a faraway object, they found a sense of peace that few things on Earth could give. "It's fragile," one said softly, "but it's also eternal." There was truth in that paradox. The comet's tail, so delicate it could vanish with a change in the wind, was also eternal in what it represented, a glimpse of how light can sculpt even the coldest matter into something that moves the soul. News of the new images spread quickly. The public saw them as ethereal portraits, photographs that seemed almost like art. For a moment, the comet's image appeared on screens across the world, in classrooms, in newspapers, in quiet corners of the internet. People stared, and even without understanding the science, they felt something stir. The comet's tail was not merely a trail of dust. It was a trace of time, a symbol of grace, carved into the infinite. In homes far from any observatory, children looked up at the stars and imagined what it might be like to follow that trail, to glide beside the comet as it journeyed through the sun's domain. Poets found new words for light. Musicians wrote pieces that mirrored the rise and fall of the comet's arc. The universe had once again reached into human imagination and lit a small fire there. Meanwhile, scientists continued their vigil. They knew the coming weeks would be crucial. The comet was approaching perihelion, its closest point to the sun. With each passing day, the heat would grow, and the tail might grow longer still, or the comet might fracture under the strain. The line between endurance and dissolution was thin, yet as they watched the images flicker on their screens, the scientists didn't feel fear. They felt gratitude. For in the comet's radiance, they saw the beauty of impermanence, the quiet truth that nothing in the cosmos lasts forever, yet everything leaves a trace of light behind. Outside, the wind rose again, whispering through the high desert. The stars above flickered faintly, their light crossing unimaginable distances to reach the small circle of watchers on Earth. Somewhere beyond that sky, Three-Eye Atlas continued its slow revolution, trailing its luminous veil behind it, like a note held too long on an infinite chord. Its dance with the solar wind had only begun. Soon it would reveal more: its chemistry, its secrets, the strange poisons it exhaled into the void. And as it moved, humanity would keep listening, following, and learning, as if the universe itself were teaching us how to see again. The comet's tail had become the universe's quiet symphony, its curve a song of dust and motion. a reflection of light that drifted like a prayer through the void. But beauty in the cosmos, as in all creation, often carries its own contradictions. Where there is light, there is also the unseen particles and forces that remind us how delicate life truly is. And so, just as the astronomers celebrated the shimmering grace of 3i Atlas, they discovered that hidden within its radiance was something darker, colder, and strangely alive, the breath of poison. The Gemini South telescope, which had painted the comet's elegant tail across the August sky, turned its instruments toward the faintest frequencies of light, the ones that spoke of elements and molecules, the hidden chemistry of creation. Through the Gemini multi-object spectrograph, a spectral line appeared, subtle yet unmistakable, glowing faintly where no line should have been. The scientist overseeing the data paused, then leaned closer. That, she whispered, is cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide, one of the most lethal compounds known to life on Earth. To humans, it is the essence of death. To the cosmos, it is simply another building block, indifferent, ancient, and necessary. The spectrum told a simple truth. Atlas was releasing cyanide gas into space. Not a whisper of it, but torrents, billions upon billions of molecules pouring from its nucleus, every second carried on invisible winds of vapor and light. The news spread quietly through the global network of astronomers. There was no panic, no sensationalism, only awe. For the appearance of cyanide was not unusual for comets. Many of them breathe it as they near the sun. But to find it here in a visitor born beyond our solar system was something entirely new. It was proof that the ingredients of chemistry, the same ones that shape both poison and possibility, exist everywhere, even between the stars. The researcher who identified the spectral line was Bin Yang, a quiet, precise scientist at Diego Portales University. During a late-night session, she had seen the emission spike and confirmed it with careful calculations. Later, she would describe that moment not with fear, but with wonder. "It's like hearing the comet speak," she said softly. "It's telling us about where it came from." From her observations, the team determined that the comet was now between 2.5 and 3 astronomical units from the sun, just the right distance for sunlight to awaken the volatile chemicals frozen within its heart. As the warmth seeped deeper into its crust, the trapped cyanide gas escaped, glowing as it met the light. In that fragile glow, scientists could read the comet's composition, its history, even hints of the environment where it had formed. But the data held another revelation. The ratio of cyanide to diatomic carbon, known as C2, was astonishingly low. 3i Atlas was almost empty of the carbon chains that define most comets within our solar system. It was as though it had been born in a colder, poorer nursery of stars, a place where carbon never had the chance to flourish. Astronomers called it carbon chain depleted, a term that sounded clinical, but in truth carried the poetry of absence. That absence spoke volumes. It meant that 3i Atlas came from a region of the universe unlike our own, a place where the chemistry of life was sparse, where heat and light were fleeting visitors. And yet here it was, venting its exotic breath into our sunlight, a relic of a forgotten world, sharing its secrets with us before vanishing again into the dark. For a moment, the scientists felt small, as if peering through a window into a reality colder than imagination could grasp. One of them wrote in his notebook, "It is both poison and promise." In its exhale lies the story of creation itself. On Earth, where people read the headlines without fully understanding the science, the discovery of cyanide caught attention for different reasons. The word itself, cyanide, carried a shiver. But among those who looked deeper, there was something strangely humbling about it. How ironic, they thought, that a substance so deadly to human life was also a part of the recipe that made life possible. For without the volatile chemistry of the cosmos, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, there would be no oceans, no breath, no beating hearts. In that paradox, there was beauty. The comet was not a monster. It was a teacher. It reminded us that existence is born from balance between light and darkness, warmth and cold, creation and decay. The very elements that can end life are the same ones that sustain it. Astronomers across the world joined in confirming the finding. From Hawaii to the Canary Islands, from Italy to Japan, they trained their instruments on the comet, each one measuring the cyanide signature and finding it stronger with each passing day. The once faint emission line had grown bolder, sharper, as if the comet itself were speaking louder, daring us to listen. A paper published in early September estimated that 3I Atlas was releasing roughly 800 sextillion cyanide molecules per second, an unimaginable torrent flowing from a body barely 5 kilometers wide. To most, those numbers meant little, but to those who studied them, they were evidence of something profound. Even the smallest, most fragile wanderer could fill the emptiness of space with energy, with meaning, with the breath of its own story. As the comet continued toward the sun, its cyanide glow deepened. Yet despite the ominous name of the molecule, there was no fear in the hearts of those who watched. Instead, there was reverence, for in the act of releasing its inner gases, 3I Atlas was not dying. It was revealing itself layer by layer, atom by atom, to anyone who cared enough to look. One night, Dr. Yang wrote in her journal, "It is strange how beauty and danger are never far apart. We study the breath of poison, and all I can feel is gratitude that it exists." Her words captured what many felt, but could not say aloud, that the universe is not here to comfort us. It is vast, indifferent, and filled with both creation and destruction. Yet somehow we find comfort in knowing that both are necessary. The comet's journey was far from over. Its cyanide emissions would continue to rise, its carbon traces perhaps to grow as it warmed further. Some astronomers speculated that it might even begin to release water vapor, soon joining the common pattern of solar comets. But others warned that it might not survive that long, that the fragile body could fracture, crumble, and fade before reaching perihelion. And so as the comet glowed faintly with a halo of invisible poison, the watchers on Earth could only wait. They stared through their instruments, through the layers of atmosphere and light years of space, at this fragile visitor, whose every breath told a story of extremes. For all its danger, the Atlas was still a mirror of life, born of dust, warmed by light, destined to fade. And as it drifted through the solar winds, exhaling its delicate toxins into the void, it whispered to us in the only language the universe knows, that everything, even poison, has a place in the great harmony of existence. The world had watched in awe as 3I Atlas revealed its fragile breath, a shimmer of cyanide suspended in the sunlight, both deadly and divine. Scientists spoke of chemistry of molecules dancing in the heat. Yet behind the data lay something more profound, a silence that belonged only to ancient things. The comet was no longer just an object of study. It had become a whisper from the dawn of creation. And within that whisper, a new secret waited to be uncovered, one written not in brightness, but in absence. As astronomers continued to analyze the Gemini data, they noticed something peculiar. The cyanide signature was strong, clear, undeniable. But the usual companion lines, the glowing traces of diatomic carbon or C2, were missing, or at least nearly so. In most comets, these carbon molecules shine bright, painting their tails in emerald hues under the touch of sunlight. Yet 3I Atlas seemed to carry almost none of them. It was as scientists described it, carbon chain depleted. To most, that phrase sounded purely technical, but for those who spent their lives listening to the language of the stars, it was like discovering that a familiar song had been rewritten in a minor key. It spoke of a birth in a colder cradle in a region of the cosmos where carbon, the fundamental element of life, was rare, locked away, or never fully formed. The comet's very composition was a relic of its origin, a memory of a place where warmth never came, where stars flickered faintly and died young. The numbers told the story clearly. For every molecule of cyanide, there were fewer than 1/10 as many molecules of C2. That imbalance made 3I Atlas one of the most carbon-poor comets ever observed. Even Borisov, another visitor from the interstellar depths, had carried more of those familiar green molecules. To some scientists, the similarity between them was a pattern, a clue that interstellar comets born in other systems might share a chemistry distinct from our own. To others, it was a haunting coincidence, a reminder that we still know almost nothing about what lies beyond our sun's fragile sphere. In the quiet of observatories around the world, astronomers debated the meaning of the finding. What kind of world could give birth to such a thing? What kind of star would cradle a comet that holds so little of the stuff we call life? Theories bloomed like fragile constellations across their notes and models. Perhaps it had formed in the outer edges of a dim binary system, or within the cold debris ring of a dying star. Or perhaps it came from no system at all, an orphan born in the interstellar void, built from the dust of long-dead suns. The truth was lost somewhere in the silence between the stars. And yet even in that silence, there was poetry. 3. Atlas, with its missing carbon, was like a ghost of creation itself. Proof that the universe does not always repeat its songs, that not every world is built for life, and that beauty can exist even where life cannot. The scientists studying it began to speak differently about their work. Their words softened, their reports carried a strange reverence. In academic language, they wrote of carbon chain depletion ratios and comparative volatility models. But between the lines, one could sense something else, a quiet awe, as though they had brushed fingers against the fabric of eternity and felt how fragile it truly was. At a small conference in Geneva, one researcher stood before her peers and said, "If 3I Atlas comes from a colder, emptier place, then it carries with it the memory of that silence. Its very chemistry is a kind of music, one that tells us what the universe sounds like when there is no life to listen." The room fell still, as if everyone understood that for a moment science had crossed into something more sacred. On the other side of the world, in a desert observatory, another astronomer stared at the night sky and thought of how strange it was that the absence of carbon could make a comet so beautiful. He imagined it drifting through interstellar space, mute, forgotten, untouched by warmth. Until one day, by pure chance, gravity pulled it toward our sun. It's like finding a fossil, he wrote in his notebook, not of bone, but of light. Even the public reading articles about carbon depletion felt a trace of wonder. The story carried a melancholy kind of hope, that even lifeless things could find purpose, that even the coldest wanderer could bring light to another world. In a sense, 3i Atlas was teaching humanity the same lesson it had always needed to learn, that existence is not defined by what it has but by what it gives. As the comet drew closer to the sun, some astronomers speculated that its chemistry might change. Perhaps the missing carbon would emerge as deeper layers melted, revealing the inner history of its birth. Others doubted it, believing that the depletion was fundamental, a fingerprint of an alien origin that no amount of heat could erase. Either way, the coming weeks would be decisive. The comet's approach to perihelion was imminent, and with it the chance to see whether it would survive or shatter. But for now, the world waited. The data streams slowed, the telescopes recalibrated, the nights stretched longer. In the hush between discoveries, humanity looked up once more, not in search of answers, but in quiet gratitude for the questions themselves. In a way, the carbon that was missing from 3i Atlas became the most eloquent part of its message. It was as though the comet were saying, "I am not what you expected. I am not made of what you know. And yet, I am here, carrying the memory of places you will never see." One night, as the Earth turned beneath a curtain of stars, a young astronomer stepped outside her observatory. She looked up and whispered to herself, "We're not so different. We're made of carbon, and it's not. But we both come from the same dust." She stood there for a long time, feeling the cold air brush her face, realizing that even the smallest particles connect everything that exists. Somewhere above, the comet continued to travel unbothered by human thoughts, unburdened by meaning. Yet its path had crossed ours, and that was enough to make the infinite feel intimate. When she finally went back inside, she paused before closing the door and took one last look at the stars. The night seemed endless, but not empty. The silence of 3i Atlas had become part of her own. As the comet drifted onward, shedding light and secrets in equal measure, humanity watched with reverence. The next images would bring something new, a faint shift in color, a subtle change in hue. The green of carbon, thought to be missing, would soon make a mysterious return. And with it, another question: had the universe decided to surprise us once again? The nights following the discovery of the comet's carbon silence felt quieter than before, as though the universe itself had drawn a long breath. 3i Atlas had already rewritten the textbooks, its missing carbon, its frozen chemistry, its unearthly origins. Yet in the vastness of creation, silence rarely lasts. Just when astronomers believed they understood the story, the cosmos decided to whisper again, softly, mysteriously, through a color that had always belonged to the language of life: green. It began with a few amateur astronomers in Namibia, standing under the clearest sky in the world. The lunar eclipse that night painted the moon in shades of copper and blood, and across the darkened heavens, the watchers turned their lenses toward the shadowed stars. Among them were two seasoned sky photographers, Michael Yeager and Gerald Raymond, men who had spent countless nights chasing the faint ghosts of comets. They had heard of 3I Atlas, of course. The interstellar wanderer had become a quiet legend among their kind. But what they saw that night made their hearts still. As their long-exposure cameras gathered light, a new hue began to emerge from the blackness, a faint, surreal green halo around the comet's core. At first, they thought it must be an artifact, a trick of the lens or a flare from the moon. But as the minutes passed and the images stacked together, the color only grew stronger, more deliberate, as if the comet had decided to cloak itself in emerald fire. They checked and rechecked their instruments, adjusted filters, and compared exposures. There could be no mistake. The interstellar traveler, once known for its pale, dust-colored glow, was now shining in green. Word of the discovery spread quietly but quickly through the community of comet watchers. Within hours, observatories from South America to Europe pointed their telescopes toward the coordinates. The data confirmed what the photographers had seen. The comet's coma was fluorescing, glowing faintly but unmistakably at a wavelength near 5 and 18 nanometers, the spectral fingerprint of diatomic carbon C2. It was the same carbon that scientists had once called missing. Now it was returning bright enough to paint the comet in color. Astronomers were astonished. For weeks, they had classified 3I Atlas as carbon chain-depleted, a world without the molecular richness of most comets in our solar system. Yet here it was glowing with the same hue that had made comets famous since ancient times. Green, the color of renewal, of life, of strange celestial chemistry. No one could say for certain what had caused the change. Perhaps the comet's approach toward the sun had awakened deeper layers of its icy heart, releasing trapped C2 gas into the light. Perhaps the cosmic rays and heat had rearranged the molecules on its surface, freeing what had long been locked within. Or perhaps it was something more poetic, something that science could measure, but never fully explain, a transformation that occurred only under the warmth of attention. Dr. Bin Yang, still leading her analysis from Chile, looked at the latest spectrum and smiled quietly. "It's as if the comet waited to show us its color," she said. Maybe it was always there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right light. Her colleagues agreed. The shift was not just chemical, it was emotional in its way. For after weeks of studying the comet's silence, the sudden emergence of green felt like hearing a long-lost melody return in the night. It was a reminder that the universe has a way of revealing itself gradually, piece by piece, to those who are patient enough to keep watching. To the public, the image of a glowing green comet captured imaginations instantly. News outlets called it the Emerald Visitor from another star. Children painted it in school projects, and artists depicted it as a celestial traveler, leaving a trail of light across the heavens. For a brief time, the color of carbon became the color of wonder. Yet amid the excitement, scientists remained cautious. They knew that diatomic carbon, though beautiful, was fleeting. It could exist only in the coma, where sunlight energized it. Closer to the nucleus, it would quickly break apart. The green glow then was not permanent. It was a passing bloom of chemistry, like the brief unfurling of a cosmic flower. Within weeks, it would fade again. And still, that made it all the more precious. In the quiet halls of observatories late at night, researchers would pause between measurements and simply look at the images. The comet's pale green halo seemed alive in a way numbers could not describe. It was not the bright, saturated green of fantasy paintings, but a tender shade, soft as moss, luminous as breath in moonlight. It pulsed faintly, expanding and contracting, as the gases interacted with sunlight, creating an illusion of motion even in still photographs. Some of the younger scientists who had grown up dreaming of space confessed to feeling a strange affection for the comet. "It's like it's talking to us," one said. "First it was quiet and cold, then it learned how to shine." Another replied, "Maybe it's reminding us that even things we call dead can still surprise us." That thought lingered long after the lights dimmed and the instruments powered down. For in truth, 3I Atlas was teaching humanity a quiet lesson. It was not just a scientific object, not just data, it was a mirror. It showed that even in the emptiest corners of the universe, beauty can emerge from scarcity, and light can grow from what was thought barren. As days passed, the comet's tail lengthened further, and its glow deepened. Through telescopes, the green radiance blended with the pale silver dust, giving it a dreamlike aura. To watch it was to see two forces in harmony, the cold of interstellar ice and the fire of a distant sun. Each needed the other to exist. For a few rare nights, 3I Atlas was at its most luminous, its cyanide and carbon mingling in one ethereal dance. It was both life and death, creation and decay, singing together in the language of light. Then, gradually, as all comets do, it began to dim. The sun grew too bright, the distance too close, and soon it slipped behind the solar glare, invisible to Earth once more. The astronomers knew this would happen, yet when it did, they still felt the ache of farewell. For months they had watched the visitor, learned its secrets, listened to its silence. Now, as it passed beyond sight, it left behind not emptiness, but a trace, a memory written in data, in images, in hearts, that had learned something undefinable. And in that green glow, captured forever in photographs, humanity found a kind of grace, that even in the coldest wanderer, there lives a spark that answers the sun. As 3I Atlas slipped into the light and vanished, a new chapter waited to unfold. For far from the world of telescopes and data in quiet offices and lecture halls, a different conversation had begun. Some scientists were calling it the dawn of a new era in interstellar study. But others, particularly one man at Harvard, were asking a different, more unsettling question. What if 3I Atlas wasn't a comet at all? The emerald glow of 3I Atlas faded into the sun's brilliance, and for a brief moment, humanity was left with silence. Once again, a silence both humbling and immense. The comet, that strange visitor from beyond the stars, had dazzled the world with its mystery, its shifting light, its chemical songs that spoke of creation and decay. But as it slipped behind the golden veil of daylight, another kind of light began to flicker, not in the sky, but in the minds of men. A question that had always lingered at the edge of wonder returned now, louder, bolder, more dangerous. What if it wasn't just a comet at all? The first to voice that thought openly was a man already known for daring to stand where reason trembled. Professor Avi Loeb of Harvard University, an astrophysicist both admired and criticized in equal measure, had long been fascinated by interstellar visitors. Years earlier, when the cigar-shaped, Oumuamua passed through the solar system, he had proposed something few scientists dared to say aloud, that it might not be a natural object, but a fragment of alien technology. His idea had sparked both curiosity and controversy. Now, as the world spoke softly of the glowing three-eye Atlas lobe, once again stepped forward, with the same calm certainty that had made him both famous and feared in the scientific community. In the heat of July, while the comet was still dazzling telescopes across the world, he published a paper. Its title was direct, even audacious: Is the interstellar object, 3I, Atlas, alien technology? The phrase rippled across headlines like a tremor. Scientists paused. Journalists leaned forward. The public, ever eager for wonder, listened. The idea was as thrilling as it was unsettling. What if this comet, this visitor from beyond, wasn't born of ice and dust at all? What if it was something made? Something built? Loeb's reasoning was, as always, bold, but grounded in the language of physics. He argued that the estimated size of 3I Atlas was inconsistent with what interstellar space should contain. Given how rare dense material is between stars, an object of that apparent size, several kilometers wide, should be nearly impossible. If we are correct about its dimensions, he wrote, then its existence cannot easily be explained by natural processes. To him, the possibilities branched like the arms of a galaxy. Perhaps 3I Atlas was not a comet, but a piece of alien debris, an ancient probe, a vessel, a relic of a civilization that had long since gone silent. Perhaps it had drifted for millennia, gathering dust and ice, masquerading as a comet until curiosity drew our gaze. He even speculated that its path, so precise and elegant, might not be entirely random, that perhaps its route had been shaped by intention. It was a wild thought, the kind that divides worlds. Some found it poetic, others found it reckless. Within days, Loeb's theory ignited debates across universities and observatories. In coffee rooms and online forums, scientists argued not about equations, but about humility, about whether the search for life beyond Earth should include ideas that bordered on the impossible. A few spoke with admiration. Every great discovery begins as heresy, said one astronomer in Rome. Perhaps Loeb is wrong, but perhaps wrong in the way that opens doors. Others were less kind. They accused him of chasing attention, of clouding science with dreams. They reminded the public that early measurements of the comet's size had already changed. The original estimate, 10 kilometers across, had been revised by Hubble's more precise data to barely 5. To them, Loeb's arguments were built on numbers that no longer stood. Still, the idea refused to die. It grew in the minds of those who deep down wanted to believe. Humanity has always been haunted by the question of company. For every generation that looked up at the stars, the same wonder returned. Are we alone? Loeb knew this well. He spoke not as a mystic, but as a scientist who saw beauty in risk. It is our duty to consider every possibility, he told a journalist calmly. If it turns out to be nothing more than a comet, then we have learned. But if it is something more, then we will have missed the greatest discovery in history by refusing to look. The world listened, divided between skepticism and hope. Television programs discussed the idea. Podcasts invited astrophysicists to argue both sides. The word alien, so often dismissed, was now uttered with a new kind of respect, a careful curiosity that bordered on reverence. Meanwhile, others responded in defense of the ordinary. A geoscientist named Ayasanul Haque published his rebuttal, pointing to updated trajectory data that explained 3I Atlas's path through purely gravitational means. There is no need, he wrote, to invoke intelligence where natural law suffices. His papers were calm, measured, almost gentle in their dismissal, yet their tone carried a faint echo of weariness, as if he knew the argument wasn't really about data anymore. It was about belief. In truth, neither man was wrong. The universe is vast enough to hold both answers at once, the logical and the miraculous. For the astronomers who had watched 3I Atlas from the beginning, the debate felt strangely human. They had seen its light flare and fade, its tail shimmer and vanish. They had listened to its chemical whispers, watched its dust drift into the void. And whether it was a fragment of alien craft or a frozen traveler of ice, it had changed something inside them. It had reminded them that humility and imagination are not enemies but siblings, that to study the stars is also to dream. When Loeb was later asked if he truly believed the comet was artificial, he smiled and said, "I believe it's possible. And possibility is the first step toward discovery." His words resonated more deeply than the science itself. They captured the spirit of exploration, the same yearning that had carried humans from caves to constellations. In quiet observatories far from the noise of debate, the comet continued its journey. It neither confirmed nor denied anything. It simply moved unbothered by the arguments it had inspired. Its tail shimmered faintly in the sunlight, as if amused by the notion that humans might think they could guess its secret. And in that quiet, something beautiful happened. People began to see the story not as proof or refutation, but as poetry. A world arguing about whether a comet could be alive was in its own way more alive than it had been before. The mystery itself had given humanity a reason to look up again, to wonder, to dream, to ask questions too big for certainty. As the debate simmered, the comet neared its perihelion, the closest it would come to the sun. Instruments on Earth prepared for one last look before it disappeared behind the glare. Whether natural or not, it was about to face the light, and no one could say what would happen next. The universe had never needed our permission to astonish us. And as 3I Atlas curved toward the sun's blinding horizon, one truth lingered in the minds of all who had watched it, that even if it were only dust and ice, it had reminded humanity of something priceless, how to listen to the sky with wonder again. The whispers of wonder that followed Avi Loeb's claim drifted across the scientific world like dust carried by starlight, fascinating, divisive, and impossible to ignore. Humanity had dared once again to utter the word alien, and for a brief, breathless moment, the cosmos had seemed more intimate, closer to us than ever before. But as the glow of excitement began to fade, the voices of caution rose in response. The universe, it seemed, was reminding us that even wonder must learn to wait. The debates unfolded slowly, not in headlines, but in the quiet persistence of research papers, late-night conferences, and long discussions between colleagues who loved the same stars but saw them differently. Loeb's theory had lit a spark, but now others gathered to cool it with the gentle precision of reason. Among them was Dr. Ayasanul Haque, a soft-spoken geoscientist working far from the glamour of major observatories at a small university in Malaysia. He had read Loeb's words not with disdain, but with the weary patience of someone who had seen this pattern before. How the hunger for the extraordinary often blinded people to the quiet beauty of the ordinary. In September, Hawke published his first rebuttal. It was measured, elegant and kind, written not to destroy, but to steady. Using newly updated trajectory data from NASA's tracking archives, he showed that 3I Atlas's flight path required no mysterious propulsion, no invisible hand, no sign of engineered intent. Its speed, though tremendous, was perfectly consistent with the pull of the sun and the slingshot of planetary gravity. To him, the comet's journey was miraculous enough, without needing to imagine a designer behind it. There is grace, he wrote, in accepting that nature alone can create wonders. His words spread quietly a ripple across a restless ocean. Many scientists nodded in agreement, grateful for his calmness amid the noise. Others felt torn, their hearts pulled between two truths, the yearning for something more and the humility of evidence. The debates did not end there. Loeb replied, as he always did, with a mixture of passion and defiance. The pursuit of knowledge, he wrote, requires courage to question the comfortable. To some, his words were inspiring. To others, they sounded like provocation. The air between certainty and curiosity became charged, like the space between two storm clouds. And yet beyond the walls of academia, ordinary people continued to listen. The argument between scientists became, in its own strange way, a conversation between humanity and the cosmos. Each side spoke not only of comets and data, but of faith, the faith that truth, however slow, would always find its way through the noise. Meanwhile, far from human voices, 3I Atlas continued its silent path toward the sun. It neither confirmed nor denied anyone's theories. It spun gently through the solar winds, shedding dust and gas unchanged by the arguments it had inspired. Its only voice was light, and its only response was to keep moving. From the observatories, astronomers watched with quiet reverence. Their telescopes recorded the subtle shifts in its tail, the faint twitches of brightness that came as the comet reached new levels of activity. Data flowed endlessly, numbers, spectra, images. But behind every calculation was something deeper, the quiet understanding that no amount of human noise could hurry the rhythm of the universe. One evening in Geneva, during a panel discussion on the comet, a senior astrophysicist named Dr. Lemaire paused after a heated exchange and said softly, "Perhaps we're missing the point. Whether it's alien or not, the Atlas has made us talk to one another again about wonder. Isn't that the real discovery?" The room fell still. Even the skeptics smiled. For a moment, everyone remembered why they had chosen this work: to seek, to question, to marvel, not just to prove. The comet had reminded them of something Loeb and Hawke, in their own opposing ways, both understood: that truth is not a prize won in battle, but a horizon that moves as we walk. Outside the conference halls, the world turned. The media moved on to other stories. The comet was no longer front-page news. But in the quiet spaces late at night, when telescopes hummed in the dark, and computer screens flickered with the soft pulse of data, people still watched. They still cared. There were students in Tokyo using borrowed equipment to track the faint glimmer of its tail. There were amateur astronomers in the deserts of Arizona whispering prayers before each exposure, as if the sky might listen. And there were poets somewhere in small apartments, writing about a traveler from another world that had come and gone, leaving behind only questions. The noise of debate faded, replaced by something gentler: patience. The scientists learned to wait, to observe, to listen. They knew that in time the comet itself would offer the answers they sought, not through miracles or revelations, but through data light and the slow grace of understanding. Ake, in his final commentary, wrote a line that stayed with many long after. To love the universe, he said, is to let it unfold at its own pace. Loeb, in a later interview, agreed, though perhaps without realizing it. Discovery is not about certainty, he mused, but about the willingness to look even when everyone else looks away. Two men standing on opposite sides of a question had found themselves speaking the same language after all. As October approached, the comet drew nearer to its destiny. It was now racing toward perihelion, the closest point of its orbit around the sun. The instruments prepared for what might come next. Would it survive the blazing heat, or crumble into fragments like so many fragile wanderers before it? The astronomers could only guess, and yet the tone of their waiting had changed. There was no longer urgency, no fear of being wrong. There was only awe. Whether the comet was natural or something beyond imagining, it had already done what no other object could. It had reminded humanity that science at its heart is not about certainty, but about love. As the nights grew shorter and the comet approached the burning edge of daylight, one could almost imagine that it too had grown weary of the noise. Its tail thinned, its light softened, its motion steadied. It seemed for the briefest of moments to pause in its journey, as though listening to the very voices it had awakened on a small blue planet far away. And then, without fanfare or sound, it began to slip behind the sun, vanishing from human sight. But even in its disappearance, 3i Atlas left something behind. An understanding, perhaps. The truth is not a single answer written in stone, but a slow unfolding written in light. The debates had quieted. The arguments that once filled lecture halls and news headlines faded into a soft hum, like the echo of a song now complete. What remained was the waiting. The world had grown still again, holding its breath as 3i Atlas, the traveler from beyond the stars, approached the moment every comet must face, the point of closest approach to the sun. For months, it had captured human imagination with its light, its mystery, its defiance of the ordinary. Now it was time to see whether that light would survive the fire or be consumed by it. On the morning of October 30th, telescopes around the world awoke early. Their lenses turned toward the eastern horizon. The comet was nearing perihelion, the point in its orbit where it would pass within 1.4 astronomical units of the sun, close enough for the heat to peel away its frozen layers, close enough for the light to swallow it whole. Astronomers knew what that meant: beauty, but also risk. Many comets never survived this journey. Some fractured quietly, disappearing in clouds of dust. Others burst apart in a blaze of brief, astonishing brilliance. In control rooms from Hawaii to Italy, from Chile to Arizona, scientists watched the data streams with reverent silence. The comet that had divided their theories was now uniting them in awe. Every heart beat with the same quiet question: would it endure? From the space telescopes, signals began to arrive. the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory. Soho caught the first faint trace, a streak of light bending gracefully along the sun's radiant arc. Its tail was enormous now, tens of millions of kilometers long, bending like silk under the pressure of the solar wind. The particles that made it shimmer were being flung into space at incredible speeds, forming a luminous veil that glowed brighter with every passing hour. As the comet drew closer, the instruments registered a surge of brightness. Its magnitude rose sharply, an explosion of light so pure that even seasoned astronomers felt a childlike thrill. "It's burning," someone whispered, "and yet it's beautiful." The comet was indeed burning, not in the way of fire, but in the slow celestial unraveling that happens when ice meets sunlight. Gases boiled away dust, erupted into space, and for a moment 3I Atlas shone like a small green star, a final breath made visible. For all the data pouring in, graphs, numbers, wavelengths, it was the silence in the observatories that spoke the loudest. Scientists who had argued fiercely about origins now sat side by side watching the same light, humbled by the same truth. Whether alien or natural, whether born in a distant system or sculpted by the quiet hands of physics, 3I Atlas was doing what all things in the universe eventually do. It was surrendering to the inevitable, not in defeat, but in grace. Outside the world of instruments, the story reached the public once more. Images from Soho and Spherex appeared online, soft arcs of color, faint halos of dust curling near the sun's rim. The comet was invisible to the naked eye, but its presence filled hearts nonetheless. People wrote poems, shared images, whispered prayers. Some saw in its approach a metaphor for life itself, to come from darkness to shine briefly, and to return to the unknown. Others watched with quiet grief, sensing the loneliness of a traveler nearing its end. In one university lecture hall, an elderly professor told his students, "We are watching the past dissolve into light." The class fell silent, and for a moment no one took notes. They simply watched the live feed on the projection screen where the comet, tiny, radiant, fragile, moved steadily toward the sun's edge. By noon it was gone from every visible spectrum. The glare of the sun consumed it completely. All that remained were predictions and hope. Would fragments emerge on the other side? Would the comet break apart? Or would it survive the passage intact? A scarred but living ember from the dark between stars. Hours passed. Instruments strained against the solar brightness. The James Webb Space Telescope turned its gaze cautiously, searching for any hint of light that might betray survival. Hubble, too, waited for its chance once the sun's glare dimmed. But for now, there was only silence. The visitor had stepped into the fire, and humanity could do nothing but wait for it to reappear or not. In those hours of waiting, something sacred happened. The chatter ceased, the arguments dissolved, and across observatories, living rooms, and lonely mountaintops, people shared the same quiet humility. For the first time since the discovery of 3I Atlas, humanity was united not by answers, but by awe. The comet had stripped away the noise of speculation and left only wonder. One scientist in Chile wrote in her log that day, "It feels as though we are watching a soul pass through judgment, measured not by what it was, but by what it leaves behind." As evening fell, the first data from solar probes began to arrive. It was faint, so faint that most would have dismissed it as background noise, but Within it lay a familiar rhythm, a glimmer of light just beyond the sun's disk, subtle yet distinct. Against all odds, 3I Atlas had survived. It emerged from the blinding corona dimmer than before, its tail shortened, and its nucleus smaller, but it was there, alive in the only way comets can be, by continuing to move. The scientists cheered softly, some laughing, others wiping their eyes. The comet had endured what many believed it could not. And in its endurance, it had taught them something profound, that survival is not about strength, but about persistence. Even the smallest body, even one scarred by light and time, could find its way through fire and come out shining. That night, as telescopes refocused on the newly reborn traveler, the data showed clear signs of change. Its brightness flickered with irregular pulses, suggesting fractures within its core. It was wounded, but still breathing light into the dark. And somewhere far below on Earth, countless people looked up at the same sky, unaware that an interstellar wanderer had just written its most beautiful chapter in the language of endurance. For the scientists who had followed it from the beginning, this was not just a celestial event. It was a parable. The universe, vast and indifferent, had shown them that even in the face of the sun, where everything seems to end, there can still be continuation. The next phase would be one of rediscovery. As the comet moved away from the sun's blinding grasp, new instruments, Maven, Spherex, Hubble, and Webb, would study it again, searching for answers written in the dust it had left behind. And yet beneath the precision of science, another truth glimmered, one no telescope could measure. 3I Atlas had passed through the fire and survived, and in doing so it had reminded every watching soul of what it means to be alive, to move forward, fragile but luminous, carrying our scars like light. The sun had swallowed the sky, and for a time 3I Atlas disappeared into its brilliance. Humanity could only watch the golden horizon, where the comet had vanished, holding its collective breath. Then, like a candle flickering through smoke, it reappeared, smaller, fainter, but still alive. The astronomers who had followed it for months wept softly in their control rooms, not from triumph, but from relief. It had survived the fire. And yet survival has a cost. When something passes through such brightness, it never comes out unchanged. Now, as the weeks turned, and the comet slipped once more into the deeper quiet of space, the world waited again. Waiting became the final act of the story, the slow, suspended silence that follows awe. Humanity had watched 3I Atlas blaze like a living emerald near the sun, had debated its origins, measured its chemistry, argued over its meaning. But now there was nothing to measure, nothing to see. It had moved beyond the reach of telescopes for a while, hidden in the glow of daylight and the geometry of orbits. Its silence returned, and with it came a sense of longing, like missing a friend whose visit had ended too soon. Observatories across the world began to rest their instruments. Hubble's sensors cooled. Webb turned its gaze elsewhere. The Gemini telescopes closed their domes each dawn, their mirrors catching only the faintest traces of light left behind. The data they had gathered over months, spectral lines, light curves, chemical maps, was now all that remained, a digital echo of the traveler that had crossed their sight. Scientists retreated into analysis, but their work no longer carried the same urgency. The comet's presence had changed them, and though they still spoke in the language of equations, something in their tone had softened. In a laboratory in Geneva, a young researcher sat before her computer, replaying the last recorded image of 3I Atlas. The tail was shorter now, the color faded to a pale gray. Yet even in that dimness, she found something exquisite. It was the calm after a storm, the kind of peace that only follows survival. She wrote in her notes, "It's quieter now, but perhaps that's the point. Even silence can be a form of communication." Elsewhere, Dr. Bin Yang continued to study the final readings from the Gemini Observatory. She noticed that the levels of cyanide emission had dropped sharply, almost as if the comet were conserving what little energy it had left. The violent outgassing had ceased. What remained was a steady, faint rhythm, a pulse weak but constant. "It's resting," she murmured to herself. "It's tired, but still breathing." The image of the comet resting in the vast dark resonated deeply with those who had followed its story. People across the world began to write about it in blogs, poems, and letters to one another. "It's strange," one wrote, "to miss something we never touched." Another replied, "Maybe that's what makes it sacred, because we could only love it from afar." The fascination had evolved. It was no longer about discovery or science. It was about reflection. The comet had become a mirror, one that reflected not the stars, but the human condition, the way we burn, endure, and fade, leaving trails of light that others follow long after we're gone. When December came, the waiting began to feel like prayer. The comet was due to emerge again, slipping out from behind the sun into the pre-dawn sky. Telescopes recalibrated their teams, returning to the observatories like pilgrims revisiting a shrine. The air was heavy with quiet anticipation. Outside the walls of technology and science, ordinary people also waited, those who had watched the news months earlier, who had followed its journey through articles and photographs. They too longed to see it again, to know that it still existed. And then on a cold morning in early December, the first hint of its return appeared. A faint streak of light, so fragile it might have been a trick of the atmosphere, glimmered in the darkness above the horizon. For an instant, it seemed to breathe. Astronomers confirmed it hours later. Atlas had re-emerged. Diminished, yes, but whole. There was celebration, though it was quiet, almost reverent. Scientists spoke in hushed tones, as though raising their voices might disturb it. They shared the new images, faint gray arcs, surrounded by wisps of dust, and each one carried the same unspoken understanding. They were not just looking at a comet. They were witnessing resilience itself, written across the black fabric of space. In an editorial for Sky and Telescope, one writer put it perfectly. "We thought we were studying a comet. What we were really studying was endurance." Indeed, that endurance spoke to something deeper than astronomy. 3. Atlas had come from beyond the solar system, perhaps from a place where carbon never flourished, where light was scarce, and time unmeasured. Yet it had crossed the emptiness, faced the fire, and continued on. It was a story of persistence, not of certainty, a story that mirrored our own fragile existence on this small blue planet. In classrooms, teachers used its tale to inspire students. "Remember," and said, pointing to a photo of the comet on the board, "it's not the brightness that matters, but the fact that it kept going." In quiet churches and temples, priests mentioned it in sermons, calling it a creation of God's own patience. And somewhere in an observatory, an old scientist whispered to himself, Maybe this is what faith looks like, waiting for light to return. As 3i Atlas drifted farther from the sun, it began to fade once more, its glow diminishing with distance. But no one felt sadness this time. Its story had already become eternal, preserved not in light, but in memory. The comet had shown that beauty does not end when the brightness fades. It simply changes form. The final measurements came in a few weeks later. The comet was losing mass, but remained stable. Its path was steady, pulling it slowly back toward the outer regions of the solar system, where it would soon vanish beyond sight. Perhaps it would wander again for billions of years before passing near another star, awakening once more under a new sun. In the end, it left behind no relics, no fragments, no physical evidence, only the knowledge that for a brief span of time something ancient and foreign had shared its light with us. Humanity in its restless search for meaning had looked into that light and found its own reflection, fragile, fleeting, and yet astonishingly luminous. When the last observation was logged, an astronomer in Chile closed her laptop and stepped outside. The night was clear, and the stars burned with quiet insistence. She looked up and smiled. "Goodbye," she whispered. "Thank you for coming." The wind moved softly through the mountains, carrying her words into the dark. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human sight, Atlas continued on its way, a faint traveler returning to the endless night from which it came. But its story was no longer just its own. It belonged now to everyone who had looked up and believed that even the smallest light once seen could never truly disappear. The nights after 3i Atlas vanished again into the deep were different. The skies felt quieter, emptier, as though the universe itself had paused to remember the visitor that had crossed our solar system and left behind its brief shimmer of meaning. Those who had followed its story, the astronomers, the dreamers, the quiet souls who watched from rooftops, felt a soft ache, the kind that comes not from loss, but from wonder. The comet was gone, yet its presence still lingered, woven into the fragile fabric of human memory. In its absence, something else remained: reflection. For months, data continued to arrive, the final echoes of light captured before the comet disappeared. Each line of numbers told a story of dust and temperature, of rotation and decay. But within those sterile columns, the scientists found something almost tender. The more they studied, the clearer it became that 3i Atlas had not been a simple wanderer of ice and gas. It had been a messenger, a reminder that even in the most indifferent corners of the cosmos, meaning can emerge. In late December, as winter settled across much of the Earth, small teams gathered one last time to review the results. In a dim control room in Arizona, the final simulation of 3i Atlas's trajectory played across a glowing screen. A thin white line traced its path, its approach, its dance near the sun, and its long retreat into the darkness beyond. The image was simple, almost stark, yet those who watched it felt something stir within them. For all the science, the numbers, and the theories, this path felt less like a calculation and more like a story. A story about endurance, fragility, and light. One scientist whispered, "It's strange. We thought we were studying a comet, but what we really studied was ourselves." Her voice hung in the air like a prayer. Around her, her colleagues nodded, and no one spoke again for a long time. Elsewhere in classrooms and homes, the story of Three-Eye Atlas continued to spread, not as breaking news now, but as legend. Teachers told their students about the interstellar visitor that had crossed our system for the first time in 6 years, a traveler older than the sun, older than life itself. Children drew pictures of a green comet blazing through the sky. Writers compared it to a lost soul, finding redemption in the light. And across the world, the comet's name began to take on a new meaning, no longer just a string of letters and numbers, but a symbol of resilience, a soft whisper of eternity. Those who had once argued over its origin now spoke with gentler tones. The scientists who had doubted each other's theories came to see that their differences had never truly been about the comet itself, but about the way humans reach for understanding. The universe had reminded them that truth is rarely singular, that wonder can exist alongside reason. Perhaps that was the real gift of Three-Eye Atlas. It had brought together the dreamers and the skeptics under the same sky. In her last written note about the comet, Dr. Bin Yang penned words that seemed to capture what everyone felt, but few could articulate. "Every object that passes us leaves something behind," she wrote. "For some, it's data. For others, it's faith. For me, Three-Eye Atlas left the memory of stillness, the understanding that even in motion there can be peace." That sentence traveled quietly across the world, quoted in articles, shared in classrooms, repeated in lectures. It seemed to speak to a universal longing, a reminder that in a universe driven by constant change, stillness is a miracle. Meanwhile, astronomers continued to calculate the comet's future path. Their models showed that it would soon leave the gravitational influence of the sun, entirely heading once again into the Black Sea between the stars. Its journey through our neighborhood had been a brief detour in an eternal voyage. Some predicted that it might return billions of years from now, perhaps when humanity itself would be gone, replaced by other beings looking up in their own wonder. The thought comforted more people than it saddened. The idea that something of our age, our watching, might linger in the memory of the cosmos felt enough like immortality. Late one evening in Chile, a solitary observer stood outside the Gemini South Observatory. The air was cold and still, the sky infinite. She tilted her head back, searching for the faint trace where the comet had once passed. Of course, she found nothing. The sky was unchanged, eternal. Yet as she stood there, she felt a presence not physical, but emotional, like the echo of a note still trembling after the song has ended. Maybe she thought that's what the universe is, an echo of light that never fully dies. And she was right. Every particle that Three-Eye Atlas shed during its journey now drifted across space, tiny specks of dust reflecting sunlight for centuries to come. Somewhere far beyond Earth's reach, the tail it left behind would keep glimmering, faintly scattering photons that would travel endlessly through the void. Those particles were the comet's last words, a silent hymn to endurance. As the months turned to years, humanity moved on to other discoveries. New stars were mapped, new exoplanets found. The world's attention shifted elsewhere. Yet in quiet corners of observatories and in the hearts of those who had seen its glow, the memory of Three-Eye Atlas remained. It had not changed the universe, but it had changed the way we looked at it. It had reminded us that knowledge and wonder are not opposites, that to understand something does not mean to diminish it. And so long after its light faded from sight, The story of Three-Eye Atlas lived on as an echo, a reminder that even a momentary visitor can leave behind eternal questions. What else might be traveling through the dark? How many other wanderers have passed unseen, each carrying the secrets of forgotten worlds? Somewhere perhaps another comet was already on its way, another messenger of time and silence waiting to awaken human eyes and hearts once more. In the end, Three-Eye Atlas gave us no clear answers. It did not tell us if we were alone in the universe, nor did it confirm any grand cosmic design. But maybe that was never its purpose. Its message was simpler, deeper, and more human. It whispered in its quiet passing, "Look up. Be patient. There is more beauty in the waiting than in the knowing." The scientist in Chile, still standing beneath the stars, closed her eyes and let that thought settle in her heart. The wind brushed gently across the mountain, carrying the faint hum of the observatory's machinery, the heartbeat of human curiosity. Above her, the night stretched endlessly, filled with invisible comets, ancient lights, and the stories they would one day tell. And far away beyond the reach of any telescope, Three-Eye Atlas drifted on its dust, scattering like soft applause across eternity, its faint green memory glowing forever in the great, unending dark. It was gone, yes, but its echo, the echo of light, would never fade.